chaos and terror. The scene in a crowded Shiite mosque in the centre of the city of Shakipur in southern Pakistan.
No group has claimed responsibility for the bombing so far. However, the attack bears the hallmark of Boko Haram terrorists.
As years go by, we more commonly find that Muslim communities are being persecuted and marginalized in all regions across the globe.
According to the Interior Ministry, the prominent Shiite cleric Nimr al-Nimr is among the dead.
At least 15 people have been killed and scores more.
Calls for basic human rights from those who are oppressed are unheard, unrecognized, and often overlooked. Earlier this year, I travelled to the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, alongside the Al-Khoui Foundation, an international Islamic NGO and advocacy group. We raised concerns of the most abhorrent human rights cases affecting Muslim communities across the globe to state diplomats, United Nations officials, other NGOs and delegates. The team believed it was time to speak out, with hope to empower the voiceless. Many members of our community state that there should be a collective voice representing the cause of those oppressed on an impactful scale. The UN delegates of the Al-Khoui Foundation are a group of expert researchers and lobbyists who have been visiting the council regularly. There is a noticeable passion amongst the team members to fight for this cause, yet I want to explore as to how the team has been working on these issues and what the purpose is behind it. I spoke to Maha Reza, the chief UN delegate for the foundation, and Sayyid Yusuf Al-Khoui, director of the foundation, who both tell me more of the vision and the purpose of this mission.
Al-Khoui Foundation is a faith-based international charitable organization. The head office is based in London, and it has branches in New York and in Canada, in Pakistan, in India. So it is an international NGO, mainly concerned with welfare and education for Muslim community around the world.
It is very easy for the youth to feel disillusioned with an international system which is dominated by powerful states which abuse human rights with impunity. If they have enough money and oil, they can literally get away with murder. But having said that, and some of them actually do take part in the Human Rights Commission, but having said that, we must not lose hope. If you have a good cause, if you train your youth to be confident, document the abuses properly, I am not saying you are going to solve all the problems, but I am saying this is one way of getting your voice heard.
The NGO with the status can attend the Human Rights Council session, which has been convened 3-4 times per year. This is the session in March which we are attending. We have the right to submit a written statement and deliver an oral statement to the Council, and have an organized side event during the session about different topics. So this time we are organizing an event on minority rights and about Shia in Pakistan and different minorities.
So I'm about to deliver an oral intervention to the Human Rights Council. How it basically works is that a special rapporteur who is an expert in a particular field of human rights will basically publish their reports to the Council. Every member state of the Human Rights Council will then be able to give a 2-minute oral intervention on the topic that the special rapporteur spoke about. So for example, right now, the Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights and Terrorism has just delivered her report. After that, the countries are speaking right now, and then NGOs are given the slot of 2 minutes each to speak about their concerns regarding cultural rights and terrorism.
The Al-Khoui Foundation are here for both representation of Shia Muslim community and for protection of Shia Muslim community. We can see that Shia are persecuted all over the world, and this is our aim, to come here and raise awareness about what is happening, meet different representatives of different countries, like for example, the UK mission or different mission, who are the representative of that country in the Human Rights Council, and raise awareness, tell them what is happening, how Shia are being persecuted, killed, tortured all over the world.
The UN Human Rights Council is rich in its heritage. Based in Geneva, the city is known for its lakes and its mountains, including the renowned Lake Geneva and its proximity to Mont Blanc of the Alps mountain range. Yet more so, the city is known for its political neutrality and its advanced diplomatic relations with several states. The UN Human Rights Council acts as a forum for states, NGOs, and global communities to raise concerns on issues that they may be faced with. I was excited to see the diversity of issues raised and possible solutions for both the international community and local communities.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Al-Quway Foundation.
Mr. President, some of the most pressing issues facing the global Muslim community were raised at the Council during this trip. The reality of minority persecution in Pakistan is one of them.
On 14th August 1947, the last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten, formally transferred power to the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan.
Pakistan is a state which was formed in 1947 in its dominion, following a partition from the Indian mainland. The recognized founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was born in Karachi and derives from a Shia Muslim origin. Jinnah was an advocate of pluralism, in a state which would embrace diversity wholeheartedly, protecting all ethnic and religious domination.
It will be our constant effort to work for the welfare and well-being of all the communities in Pakistan. And I hope that everyone will be inspired by the idea of public service.
Jinnah's Pakistan is said to be dying day by day as minorities are persecuted. The Jinnah Institute, an Islamabad-based think tank, reports that 1,900 Shia Muslims have been victims of unprecedented targeted killings between the years of 2012 and 2015. Aside from Shia Muslims, other minority groups are also heavily persecuted, including Christian, Ahmadi, and Hindu communities, as well as ethnic groups such as Hazara Pakistanis. We met with a number of experts who have been working on the case of minority persecution in Pakistan, lobbying the British governments and the international community alongside the foundation.
What needs to be understood is that Pakistan was built on the foundation that we would work for the welfare of all the communities in Pakistan. That is what Jinnah said in his first speech. But unfortunately now what we see is that you have these militant groups who are almost playing a snooker game. You know, snooker is a popular game in Pakistan, and that involves getting rid of all the colorful balls. Essentially this is what they're doing, because they're attacking other communities similarly. Like the Christians are being attacked, the Ahmadi are being attacked, the Hindus are being attacked. But the largest scale of violence is against the Shia community.
I mean, you have to look at the current state of the Shia community in Pakistan I think in the light of a lot of other minority persecution that's going on around many other places in the world. But it's a regional phenomenon, I think, especially in the Middle East, where you've got a lot of money that's going into certain kinds of religious institutions, which are teaching a certain kind of very specific Islamic ideology, a very extremist Islamic ideology. And I think that that's having very, very detrimental effects on communities, not just in the subcontinent, but across the Middle East and in Asia as well, in Muslim communities there.
I think it's testimony as well, actually, that there hasn't been a huge amount of work done on Shia human rights, or at least looking to understand what's happening on the ground for Shias, whether they're persecuted or discriminated against, and what societal systems are in place for their discrimination. So I've started to look at this more, and will be very keen to do events exploring this. And one of the latest reports that we did, that was published a few weeks ago, was at the end of February 2016, looked at the treatment of different religious groups and minorities in Pakistan. And we looked as well, we had evidence from Shia groups as well, and looked at their treatment. And while we didn't have enough evidence to legally determine whether persecution was happening or not, we've called for an inquiry, a government inquiry into the situation for Shias in Pakistan.
Our armed forces have been carrying out this Zarb-e-Asab operation, which to an extent has brought the terrorism down. But what is important is to understand that extremism is an equally bigger threat. Right in the heart of Islamabad, just 5 minutes from the presidency, you have an ISIS glorifying mullah who has spoken out, who refused to condemn the killings of the children killed in the army public school, who has spoken out against the armed forces, who has spoken out against, who has recently spewed venom against the Shias. And there is an arrest warrant against him, but he still has not been arrested.
Extremist ideology preached by fundamentalist imams or religious schools consistently proves to be a problematic root cause in the intolerant narrative faced by minorities in Pakistan.
To be precise, you cannot understand it unless you see the ideology, because what is happening is that through 150,000 madrasas, one ideology is being promoted over all the others. And up until the time, this is an ideology which believes in the supremacist version of Islam, where anybody who thinks differently from them is not only an infidel, but also worthy of being killed.
The reports we're hearing are very, very worrying. I think there's often political motivations and justifications behind the persecution of Shias, who are not seen as the orthodox religion, and therefore any challenge to the majority or deemed national religion in Pakistan, anybody not adhering to that seems to be suppressed, and their voice is suppressed, and of course Shias fit into that. So I'm deeply concerned about what might be happening and the extent to which it's happening for individuals in Pakistan, and just wouldn't want anybody to live in fear for having their own identity and their beliefs.
There has to be some kind of top-down UN or developmental agency policies towards changing some of these things, and that's going to be difficult because the people who fund extremist educational institutions, they have a lot of money, and that money talks, and it's unfortunately, from my point of view as a human rights activist and a filmmaker, that it's very, very unfortunate to see my own government and the West in general kind of bowing down and letting extremism, the funders of extremism, do what they want because they have a lot of money. And I think that we need to look a lot more long term about these things and try to say that it's not acceptable for money to be going towards certain kinds of extremist ideological teaching.
Meeting with these experts really gave a hard-hitting insight into the realities of the situation in Pakistan. But the question remains, what determines the freedom to religion or belief? And what does this right mean for people? Professor Heiner Bielfeldt is one of the most prominent United Nations officials, and is the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. The foundation invited him to speak at an event in a large meeting room used by UN delegates, where we also discussed minority rights with him.
It's very important to see freedom of religion or belief not just as a minority issue. It's important that also members of the majority in every country, and I know you are from Pakistan, so that would be then the Sunni majority in Pakistan, they come on board. I think that is very important. If we just focus on minorities in isolation, it gives a wrong impression. It's very clear that in the long run, freedom of religion or belief is also very healthy for majorities, because it's also good for them to overcome that close embrace of the state. It's a matter of credibility also for majority religions to see, to live together with others.
Freedom of religion or belief is one of the most fundamental human rights, in my perspective, that enables people to live in a stable and peaceful society. It basically allows pluralism within any society, and it's housed within international treaties, both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 18, which is not legally binding, but it's also housed within the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is legally binding. And most states around the world have signed this and have ratified it, albeit some with reservations, that if they're not happy with it under Sharia law, they wouldn't want to implement it. So there's constant work to negotiate with them to understand what they mean by that and be more succinct and clear in what they mean.
States are held to account for what they have promised. They have signed up to international treaties like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and so it's their business to ensure respect for human rights of everyone, and including freedom of religion or belief for all religious people, for minorities as well as for majorities.
Professor Heiner is one example of someone the Foundation would lobby to raise awareness of human rights violation cases. As a high official, Professor Heiner drafts a report highlighting the most concerning human rights abuse case studies. This information is then used by governments, journalists, other NGOs and developmental agencies. It is therefore really important for our community to raise our voices to senior officials like Professor Heiner.
We don't get to see the other side. Street protests, demonstrations against repression, and riots.
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, one of the world's most cultured states, prosperous and ruled by a monarch. Yet Saudi Arabia is also one of the world's worst human rights violators. A state where minorities are persecuted, freedoms are limited, and opinions are unvalued. The ruling regime of Saudi Arabia is internationally recognized to have broken human rights law on uncountable occasions, clamping down on various groups, ethnic or religious, and even rights towards women. One of the most recent and notorious of Saudi Arabia's human rights violations began in March 2015, where Saudi Arabia spearheaded a military coalition amongst 8 other Arab states to begin intervention in Yemen.
The first precondition to create a condition in which Yemenis can solve the Yemeni issue, which is the only way it will be solved finally, is to stop this intervention and is to put all the necessary pressure and to use all the necessary tools the international community has to stop the illegal use of force by Saudi Arabia and the coalition led by Saudi Arabia against the Yemeni people, and stop the illegal interference in the internal affairs of Yemen.
This has been labelled as an international war crime, with a death toll of over 3,000 lives, 93% of which are civilians. The United Nations has raised concerns about reports of cluster munitions being used on villages, causing damage to communities and civilization.
if you destroy systematically infrastructure, if you destroy, like the Saudi coalition is doing now, systematically medical infrastructure, economic infrastructure, government buildings, schools, cultural heritage, then actually you're destroying civilization. You're destroying society and civilization.
Regretfully, the year 2015 displayed grave violations against the protection of heritage and religious places committed by both state and non-state actors in the Middle East. Yemen, for example, has witnessed the destruction of over 25 historical sites, including those recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage Sites by armed forces.
Many argue that the root cause of terror across the Middle East derives from Saudi ideological extremism, found in educational material and other indoctrinating propaganda. This fundamentalist philosophy is known as Wahhabism and is the recognized religion of the state.
لأن بيعة يزيد بيعة شرعية وبيعة أخذت له في حياة أبيه وأعطاه المسلم بيعتهم ولكن الله حكيم عليم ما قضى وقدر.
Wahhabism limits opportunity in society and employs an undemocratic and intolerant nature for those who wish to have an alternative voice.
Mr. President, we have to be concerned about the future generation that is being raised and the impacts of this on wider society. Educational material in a number of sovereign states is the starting point for such extremist and divisive ideology to flourish. Thus, we, the Al-Khoui Foundation, in consultation with educationalists, have developed guidelines on how to counter and deal with the extremism and bullying of children in schools. We urge the Human Rights Council to implement measures to ban any educational material within schools that promotes and incites against each other, especially ethnic and religious minorities.
The Foundation saw it critical to engage in dialogue with those lobbying for human rights in Saudi Arabia. Michael Didora, Public Policy Director for the Center of Inquiry based in Washington, and Dr. Fuad Ibrahim, researcher and political analyst, explores with me some of the most controversial human rights violations in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is one of the world's worst human rights offenders, as is widely known, at least in the Western world, but I think pretty much around the world. People at least acknowledge their human rights abuses, even if they don't want to speak up about them forcefully. Now, the human rights abuses that Saudi Arabia, the government, carries out are against really anyone who dissents from their narrow interpretation of Islam. So there are individual organizations that speak out for particular religious or non-religious groups, but when you look at what the Saudi Arabian government does, they have a very narrow interpretation of Islam, and anybody who dissents from that interpretation or questions the wisdom of the government and its policies ends up in a prison cell or being executed for that dissent.
طبعا الوضع السعودي وضع الشيعة عموما في السعودية ويعود إلى تكوين هذه الدولة السعودية التي قامت على أساس التمييز على قاعدة مذهبية وعلى قاعدة مناطقية وعلى قاعدة قبلية. وكان نصيب الشيعة في المنطقة الشرقية وفي السعودية عموما الأسد في سياسات التمييز، حيث حرمت هذه الطائفة من الحريات الدينية، من حقوقها الاجتماعية والسياسية، من حتى أدنى الحقوق والحريات المدنية.
In certain cases, you get some individuals whose cases rise up to the top and become kind of flashpoints for broader human rights abuses within Saudi Arabia. So in recent years, you've had Raif Badawi, who's a very well-known blogger in Saudi Arabia, who started a discussion forum dedicated to openly discussing the relationship between religion and politics. And for doing that, since 2012, Raif has been imprisoned. But, for every Raif, there are dozens of others who have done the same thing and just not been talked about. Another prominent case that's been talked about recently is Sheikh al-Nimr, who was recently executed And he's a Shia cleric who is leading protests against the government. Now, the Saudi government has marginalized Shias within the country for a long time. They're essentially second-class citizens in the country, and so al-Nimr was going out leading protests against the government and calling for Shias to have equal rights before law. And for that, the government cracked down on him, put him in prison, and in January 2016 executed him.
نحن على امتداد 100 عام نعيش ظلم وجور وخوف وترهيب. منذ اللحظة الأولى تولد فيها تحاط بالخوف والترهيب والمطاردة والتمكين. ولدنا وأجواء الترهيب حتى الجدران كنا نخشاها.
News of the execution of Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr has triggered protests throughout the international Shia community. Police in Bahrain fired tear gas at dozens of protesters. Demonstrators carried pictures of the leading cleric, who was one of 47 executed by Riyadh as part of Saudi Arabia's biggest mass execution since 1980.
أعتقد أن النظام السعودي اعتمد سياسة القمع، والذي يمثل الإعدام أحد أقصى أشكال هذا القمع من أجل أهداف سياسية، وليس من أجل إقرار عدالة أو من أجل تطبيق قانون، لأن المستند القانوني لهذه الإعدامات ضعيف إلى حد أنه يعني لا يجوز أن يستخدم في اعتقال فضلا عن الإعدام، لأن ما مارسوا هؤلاء، وخصوصا نتحدث عن الذين يعني مارسوا حقهم في التعبير عن الرأي، أن يصدر وكأنما الإعدام هو موجه لحريات الأفراد وحقوقهم.
Saudi Arabia believes execution is an essential tool in its justice system. Saudi carried out at least 157 executions in 2015, with beheadings reaching their highest level in the kingdom in 2 decades. As well as the recent execution of Sheikh al-Nimr, major concerns have been raised on an international scale regarding the detention of Ali al-Nimr, the nephew of Sheikh al-Nimr. Ali was arrested and detained at 17 years old in 2012, along with 2 other juveniles, and has been in solitary confinement with a lack of access to food, water, and communication with the outside world since.
My first message is to David Cameron. I say to him now, a little message from our conference, I hope he's listening. You never know. Intervene now, personally, with the Saudi Arabian regime to stop the beheading and crucifixion of Ali Mohammed al-Nimr, who is threatened with the death penalty for taking part in a demonstration at the age of 17.
Reports suggest he has been tortured, whilst his case awaited ratification from King Salman, after which his sentence of beheading and crucifixion would be carried out.
لا يمكن إنسان سوي يحكم على طفل عمره 17 سنة بهذا الحكم، وليش؟ لا دم ولا مال، أصلا لا حد يطالبه، علي ما حد يطالبه لا مال ولا بدم. فطريا واحد ما يتقتل، أمر وحشي سيء، قذر مقزز. ما أدري كيف يعني القاضي المفروض يكون يعني في موضع الأب، يرحم المتهم أكثر من الادعاء العام.
He is about to be crucified and beheaded by the Saudi government. What's your message to them about that?
Well, don't do it. We don't agree with the way that they go about these things.
أعتقد بأن سياسة الإعدامات التي بدأها الملك سلمان مع توليه السلطة في 23 يناير 2015 هي من أجل في الواقع لملمة السلطة التي تعاني من هزال وبناء كاريزما مفتعلة لشخصية ليست مؤهلة النظام يشعر بأن هناك يعني تفكك داخلي، هناك تصدع في بنية الدولة، فهو بحاجة إلى حملة ترويع وتهويل من أجل إخافة الناس ومن أجل الحفاظ على وحدة السلطة واستقرارها، ولذلك لجأ إلى الإعدامات كأحد أدوات القمع. ولكن هذه السياسة هي بقدر ما هي قد تحقق بعض النتائج القريبة، ولكنها على المدى البعيد هي تؤدي إلى تفتيت ممنهج للسلطة وإلى تقويض أركانها.
Despite consistent global criticism, Saudi is still a close ally of several Western states, particularly the hegemonic United States of America and the United Kingdom.
We have a relationship with Saudi Arabia, and if you want to know why, I'll tell you why. It's because we receive from them important intelligence and security information that keep us safe. I could come on your program, John. Well, let me just give you an example. Yes,
are we sure that they are not actually, some elements of them, within the clerics and elsewhere, the Wahhabi radicals, involved actually in fueling the very people we're trying to defeat in ISIS?
I will answer that very directly, because I think you're asking a very important question. But the reason we have the relationship is our own national security. I can think of one occasion since I've been Prime Minister where, a bomb that would have potentially blown up over Britain was stopped because of intelligence we got from Saudi Arabia. So, of course, it'd be easier for me to come on your programme and say, well, I'm not having anything to do with these people, it's all terribly difficult, etc., etc. For me, Britain's national security and our people's national security comes first.
Once analysing and understanding all these issues, the team at the UN raises these concerns in an attempt to represent the oppressed. The governmental regime in the state of Bahrain is one which similarly has become infamous for intolerance towards groups and basic rights. Bahrain is a country which has a population of only 1.5 million. Although the country is majority Shia, the ruling Al-Khalifa monarchy follows a Sunni ideology. Many believe that the populace are fighting for political freedom as a majority, and that clamping down from the regime is due to insecurity and concerns of a government takeover, as opposed to a rooting sectarian narrative.
Daily protests sweep across Bahrain despite a heavy-handed crackdown by security forces.
They're afraid of Shia. I mean, I can't help it. I born a Shia. My oppressed nation are Shia.
Bahrain's human rights climate remains highly problematic, particularly following the protests which took place in 2011. According to studies by Human Rights Watch, the country's courts convict and imprison peaceful dissenters and have failed to hold officials accountable for torture and other serious rights violations. There is evidence that the security forces continue to use disproportionate force to quell unrest.
In conducting the crackdown has been responsible for a laundry list of human rights violations, extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, lack of freedom of assembly, of expression. People have been sentenced to 5 years just for tweeting, for example, tweeting statements against the war in Yemen. Human rights activists and the entire political opposition are behind bars at the moment, or are silenced in the country or in exile. And it's just horrendous, the plight and persecution that people are facing in Bahrain at the moment.
They killed a lot of people, tortured a lot of people. Unfortunately, government of Bahrain brought a lot of foreigners to torture the Shias in the prisons, to I'm sorry to say that, but abuse and sexually abuse the women in the prison, torturing the women, torturing the children who didn't have any protection from anyone inside the country or outside. That is going on right now. It is since 2011, and we don't see any result for that.
Bahrain restricts freedom of speech and has even jailed and fined Bahraini photographers. Migrant workers in Bahrain endure serious abuses, such as unpaid wages, passport confiscation, unsafe housing, excessive work hours, physical abuse, and forced labour.
I joined the funeral procession disguised as a local to avoid raising any suspicion. Soon after, the demonstration began, and as expected, it ended in clashes with security forces.
Human rights activists and members of the political opposition face arrest and prosecution, and dozens have been stripped of their citizenship. Activists on Twitter, such as Nabil Rajab, have been arrested for voicing their own opinions too. The most worrying recent case came with the arrest of Sheikh Ali Salman, who was the leader of the opposition party, the Al-Wafaq party.
He never asked for any parties or any people to attack, so he doesn't have the ideology of violence. He never asked the people to be armed, even though it could happen over there, because people are seeing their brothers, wife, kids are getting killed, tortured. He never asked for a revolution to become violence. When you look at that and you look at the ideology like this, so you know how oppressed he is. You know how the government is oppressing him and the people like him in the prison, putting them in the prison, revoking their citizenship, which is something illegal.
The uprisings weren't about any kind of particular sectarian issues. They were about freedom, they were about human rights, they were about democracy. This is a very educated population who just wanted Bahrain to enter a new phase in which people had equal rights and had an equal say in their future.
Just before dawn, army trucks and armoured cars moved into the square. Pictures sent to Al Jazeera even showed helicopters in the sky.
And we're just asking the people of this world is to help us, to do something for these people. We are peaceful people. We are asking for our legitimate rights and nothing else. And all these troops which is coming from the Gulf, they're supposed to be protecting Bahrain from foreign attacks, not from the people of Bahrain, killing the people of Bahrain.
We have the ability to go to our government and put the pressure on them. We can do that. So this is something that gives us this ability to engage more in the communities, to go and work with the different organizations. A lot of organizations, they need the volunteers.
Well, there are many different methodologies, of course, of creating pressure within places like the UK. We ask people, for example, to write letters and call their representatives of parliament and raise Bahrain's case, or individual cases like Nabil. We ask people to, raise awareness, to participate in protests and so on. Another way to do it is to name and shame. The UK government always says that human rights and democracy is at the forefront of their foreign policy. It's something that they care very much about. And so it's on us to make sure that people are aware that they're not doing that when it comes to Bahrain. They're not doing that when it comes to their allies. And at the end of the day, I think what matters when it comes to whether the UK actually upholds the standards and principles of human rights and democracy is not whether they apply it to their foes, it's whether they apply it to their friends. And I think that's the question that needs to be asked. So one of the best methodologies is naming and shaming as well. Is saying, well, the UK government says they respect human rights, except in Bahrain. And so, posing that question to the UK government, I think, puts them in a position where they'll find it necessary to change their position.
Applying political pressure to domestic and international governments is something that may seem like a large task at first, yet this is something we can all engage in to aid situations like that of Bahrain. The key is for our community to raise voices, participate digitally, in lectures or seminars, or even on the streets. Small steps of action to incorporate a bigger change. Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki, leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, is known to be a man of piety, dignity, and righteousness.
I want to convey to you, members of the press, that the Shiite leader, Zakzaki, is safe and in protective custody.
He has promoted unity and peaceful values for decades, yet his movement is being suffocated by the government of Nigeria, who warn of a revolution headed by a Shia cleric.
The issue started in 80, when the Shia movement started in Nigeria. For many people, it was because of not understanding who are the Shia, what they are doing, what is their belief, and because of the involvement of the GCC countries in Nigeria, it pushed the Shia away from the communities. So they start being isolated and create their own community, helping the government as well in that regard. So for that, the movement, when it started, a lot of people didn't like it.
They were shooting at people who were just shouting Allah Akbar, Ya Mahdi. And videos of it is very clear. Little children, young men, old men, women. And the shooting is started and they were being just shot at like animals. Even animals are not usually shot like that. And that took around 28 hours going on. And then they moved, well, after 3 or 4 hours the shooting, they moved into his premises. And many hundreds died there because people were coming out to protect him. I was getting reports on a half an hourly basis on how people are dying in large numbers. They had no protection whatsoever.
When they attacked the mosque, Shia, because they saw the attack, they tried to defend themselves. Army headed to the mosque, killed a lot of people. Their record is around 1,000 people were killed and disappeared in that situation. A lot of agencies, they are saying that no, it was around the 500, but the reality is more than 1,000 people were killed and disappeared in that situation. With that, they didn't stop with the mosque because they saw people, women, children, men are inside the mosque. Even though that they attacked, demolished the mosque, part of the mosque, they went and attacked the house of the Shias. They went to the Sheikh Zakzaki house, they arrested him. They went to the Shia houses, arresting the Shia women and children who didn't have nothing to do with the situation around the mosque.
Then 3 of his children were killed in front of him. The incident happened that they said that women should come out, but they should remove their hijab. They refused to do that, so the soldiers went in, grabbed the women, they brought them out, they started beating them. The 3 children came out to protect the women, and the 2 were shot in the head and 1 shot in the chest.
The attacks in Nigeria signifies to us yet another brutal and appalling case of human rights violations, specifically targeting the Shia Muslim population in this instance. It is our duty to bring to light this within the United Nations and to work alongside those who will help us bring awareness to such issues. The Al-Khoui Foundation is one of many organizations working towards representation of the oppressed people on an international scale, and so far, the delegation has managed to meet some of the most influential figures in state governments to raise concerns.
I think any blame for not being represented so far, you can understand it's quite hard to organise yourselves, oneself to speak, but I think it is incredibly important that all voices are around the table and represented, both at the international level here at the UN. It's really important to have a Shia voice to raise any discrimination or persecution issues that might be of concern, so that states are able to be held accountable. And as it's all recorded, it's really important that those concerns are voiced, and likewise at the domestic level as well.
I think it's been great that there are now an increasing number of Shia groups, and I think that hopefully going forward there will be an increasing number of Shia groups who will be speaking out about abuses against Shias. In particular, though, just to give you an example about how far we've come, you know, I've been at the Human Rights Council for a couple of years, and I think when I first came here in 2013, there might have been one Shia group that was kind of, or one group that was kind of talking about Shia rights abuses. Yesterday, there was this interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief, and they only allow about 15 organizations to speak during this interactive dialogue? Well, at least 3, if not 4 of the organizations that spoke about this, spoke during this interactive dialogue, spoke about the issues regarding Shia discrimination.
It's vital that Shias have a voice as well in domestic politics, and put forward as many politicians as well. I think it's a priority. I've noticed in the UK there is no Sikh MP at the moment, and there isn't a Shia MP at the moment. And I think lacking that voice means that the Shia and Sikh communities just are not represented enough in the UK and can't be sat round the table and have equal say. So without that, there is chance for more discrimination and persecution to go on without it being checked. So it's, yeah, very, very vital.
The UN and international organization, the participation of our youth, of our women, is crucial to counter all forms of human rights abuses, all kinds of discrimination, against torture, against Islamophobia, against racism. And I think if we have enough numbers, enough youth who take part, we have enough institutions which take part, then you strengthen the basis of civil society, and you can address the problems in the language the world understands best.
And so this concludes the end of our week with the Al Khoy Foundation. We have lobbied states, governments, NGOs and other charitable organisations in an attempt to raise the issue of persecuted minorities across the international community. But the question still remains: how can the international community and international agencies protect and represent persecuted Muslim minorities? And more so, how can our communities engage and politically mobilise in a grand attempt to raise awareness of the issues concerned? This mission has been fascinating. With the expansive network of contacts we have developed, and with the progress the Foundation has made since previous trips, the work being done is promising, and issues are being documented and recognised. But this is a mission for the global Muslim community. The case studies we have explored and the realities we have witnessed should not be a distant tragedy to us. We must work to eradicate injustice in any capacity we can. From a small to a large scale level, we must keep working to fight for the oppressed, to give them the required voice that deserves to be heard, honoured and empowered.
Ahlul Bayt TV, the holy household for every household.